their job was to auction it off, to sell it off, to get revenue for the United States government. And then eventually, once they, United States paid off some debts and they were in good financial situation, they decided to try and get rid of it, of as much land as they could for settlers. So they gave it to states and they gave it to settlers like Van Patten. So the requirement was that you had to be 25 years of age, head of household, you had to live on the land and you had to work the land for 5 years, and then you would receive at most 160 acres of land. If you didn't want to work the land, then you can try and pay it off, but it was about 25 cents per acre. So that's what Van Patten did. So now let's go back to the General Land Office. So back then we had the General Land Office, and then there was an issue, as I'm sure you've heard in multiple other presentations. There was a lot of overgrazing done in the 1800s as well, during the time that Van Patten was alive. And so finally the US government decided to try and regulate it. And so they did pass the Taylor Grazing Act of 1934, and they divided up a lot of the western parts of the states into different grazing districts, and that was managed under the US Grazing Office. So the US Grazing Office and the General Land Office were combined during a big reorganization effort in 1946, and they became the Bureau of Land Management. And so the Bureau of Land Management, we have our first logo of the BLM. It didn't last very long. We have a surveyor, a logger, oil driller, I think like a cowboy. I can't remember. But anyways, this logo, this emblem, BLM emblem, didn't last very long. And then finally we transitioned into our traditional triangle. So this one with the National System of Public Lands is our most up-to-date emblem. Okay, so what does that have to do with Van Patten? Well, I just thought it was interesting because Van Patten obtained his land through the Homestead Act under the General Land Office, and it became private. All of the land up there at Dripping Springs became private, and it passed through lots of different private lands until the Nature Conservancy purchased the land and then made the exchange with the Bureau of Land Management. And so that's interesting because it was originally under the General Land Office. The General Land Office became the BLM, and now Dripping Springs is again under the General Land Office or the Bureau of Land Management. So it came full circle. Who owned Dripping Springs? Okay, so, that was just the Anglo part of the history of the area and a lot of the Western states. It doesn't really acknowledge that there was a lot of that public lands were already being occupied by a lot of indigenous peoples. And so I just wanted to really quickly say that Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument was the homeland for 3 major archaeologically defined cultural groups: the Mimbres Mogollon, the Jornada Mogollon, and the Casa Grandes peoples. And then today they have ancestral and cultural ties to many, many groups. And they are Isleta del Sur Pueblo, Tortugas Pueblo, Piro Manso Tiwa tribe of San Juan de Guadalupe Pueblo, Comanche Indian tribe, Fort Sill Apache tribe, Isleta Pueblo, Mescalero Apache tribe, Navajo Nation, Tesuque Pueblo, White Mountain Apache tribe, and the Kiowa tribe of Oklahoma. And some of these are not federally recognized tribes, but we here at the office level, we recognize all of them. So whenever we do any type of work, we do try and consult with as many tribal peoples as we can. Okay, so it's time for our little quiz. Hopefully no one has any issues with this. If you could just open up another tab, or you can go on your phone and you type in menti.com and then you put in that code. I'm not sure. That's what the issue with having only one computer. I don't know if anybody is using chat, but I've guessed, okay, let me see how many people you came in. Okay, so we have 2 players. Oh, and I did forget to mention, I don't know if you remember, but in my beginning slide, there was a picture of an ocotillo and with the red flowers. And that was my favorite plant. And I won't say anything more than that. Okay, here's the chat. Okay. Okay, we have 13 participants. So I'm gonna go ahead and start it. Okay. Let me know if there's any issues. Let me know in the chat. Oh, nice. So the second answer was a trick question. Amphispiza bileonata is a black-throated sparrow. Okay. Oh, sorry. There we go. Wow. Everyone, don't Google the answers, okay? But yeah, you're right. 245 million acres. BLM manages the most acres out of all the other federal land management agencies. For U.S. Forest Service manages 193 million acres of public lands, and the National Park Service manages 85 million acres. Okay, next question. Oh no. So Devil's Tower is the first national monument, but it is not the first BLM managed national monument. It is managed by the National Park Service. And then Prehistoric Trackways is the first national monument in our region. And then Grand Staircase Escalante is the first BLM managed national monument, and it was designated through presidential proclamation by Bill Clinton in 1996. And the reason for that was to try and imbue the BLM with more conservation values than it formerly had. Okay. Next question, last one. Yay. Yes, Permian period fossilized footprints. So the main thing, so Prehistoric Trackways National Monument, what's really special about that is the density of trace fossils that you can find there. And also these trace fossils are not dinosaurs, so obviously they're not from the Cretaceous. These are all came before dinosaurs even existed. So I'm glad that the Native Plant Society, Las Cruces chapter, is aware of this because, you know, we get lots of questions of like, oh, are there dinosaurs at prehistoric trackways? And then we do a presentation and then they still ask us if there's dinosaurs. And then the Holocene footprints, I think those are from White Sands. That's where you can find that. Okay, perfect. So now you can exit out of that. It was a very short game. Thinking back on it, maybe I should have made like more questions. Okay, so how do I go back to this? Okay, did you all enjoy the game? You can give me a thumbs up or a smile if you have your camera on. Oh wait, let's actually let's check. So okay, let's see who's the winner. So the winner with the most accurate questions and the fastest to answer is Jane. Where is Jane? Oh, I can't see anybody. So congratulations. Oh, there you are. Congratulations, Jane. You're the BLM star of the night. And then, okay, so let's go back. So that was a quick game. We won't have any more games. We'll just be presentation. So BLM has very long history with a lot of acts and policies and changes and rules and regulations. So I just thought I'd pick out a few of the very important ones. So, you know, in the 60s and 70s in the United States, we had this huge environmental movement and we got a lot of people joining, you know, the Audubon Society, the Sierra Club. A lot of people became more interested in environmental causes. And there was a lot of regulations that passed, such as the Clean Water Act, the Endangered Species Act. And one of them was the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. And so NEPA is the backbone of the BLM and how we do our work around here. So basically we have a lot of specialists in the office and they specialize in, you know, in wildlife biology and botany and soils and hydrology, and they all come together and look at projects or decisions that are being proposed to happen on BLM public lands. And then they analyze it and come up with alternatives to reject, to take no action or reject the proposed action, and or mitigate the effects of the proposed action. So it's basically, NEPA is there to help us protect the environment and also balance human use on public lands, because public lands are meant to be used by people. You know, for example, here in Las Cruces, we get our electricity through El Paso Electricity. And electricity is really important for the everyday life of Las Cruces. And a lot of that electricity, a lot of those electrical poles, a lot of that work has to pass through BLM public lands because we are surrounded by BLM public lands. And so El Paso Electric comes in and proposes a project, and our specialists have to consider if where they want to make an installation, if it's going to affect any cultural resources, any vegetation, any paleontological resources, and then they decide what to do from that, whether to move it to a different area, to reject it, or find a way to mitigate it some way. And so NEPA is really important for the work that we do. After that is the Federal Land Policy and Management Act, or FLPMA. And this was really important for the BLM because the BLM, having come from the General Land Office, trying to distribute all of these public lands, and the US Grazing Office trying to regulate grazing, was really known, for grazing and mining. And so FLPMA made it official that the BLM would, similar to the US Forest Service, have a multi-use mandate. And so they would be permitting, mining, oil and gas, as well as recreation and other projects on public lands, but with a more conservation mindset. And FLPMA gave BLM a lot more authority than it didn't have before. So for example, it established a law enforcement agency for the BLM. Another example that FLPMA gave the BLM was that it gave it a working capital fund. So basically it gave BLM money to do its work. And it also allowed it to collect fees from people coming to campgrounds to develop recreation sites to help manage those sites as well. So FLPMA was really important because it gave the Bureau of Land Management direction and a mission. Whereas before it was just like they combined two organizations and they didn't know what to do. They were not the National Park Service. So trying to figure that out. And, we're still in the process of figuring everything out. And then here's where Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument came in 1996. And as I mentioned previously, that was to imbue the BLM with more conservation values than it had before. And this is important because after that, Bill Clinton established a lot of other national monuments. And so in 2008, it brought it all together into the national system of public lands. Okay, so to recap, the United States is divided up into basically 3 different types of lands. We have state lands, private lands, and federal lands. And so federal lands are managed by different agencies. The National Park Service manages the crown jewels of the nation. US Forest Service manages national forests. US Fish and Wildlife Service manages wildlife refuges. And the Bureau of Land Management, we manage all the rest, the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's why we needed FLPMA to try and bring us all together, because we were all over the place. We have all kinds of public lands. And so we created national monuments, and then to try and organize everything and how to manage everything, we were classified as the National System of Public Lands. And this one is a little tricky. I met a National Park Service park ranger, and I kept talking about how I work on public lands, BLM managed public lands. And she said, no, don't say public lands because that confuses people. National parks are public lands too. And I'm like, well, technically, yes, but we need a name. BLM needs a name for public lands. So we are the National System of Public Lands, but that's a really long name. So we just say public lands. Okay, so within these public lands, we have the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so the good, they are lands that have some type of special characteristics, some kind of special value that needs extra protection. And so we designate those under the National Conservation Lands Program. And the National Conservation Lands Program includes things like national monuments, wilderness study areas, national scenic trails, national scenic rivers, things like that. So things that are lands that are special in some way, they get extra protections. And so here with Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument, obviously we're a national monument, and we also have wilderness. So Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument was established by a presidential proclamation on May 21st, 2014. So we still have a few months till our next birthday. And we're about 500,000 acres in size. National monuments can be created by presidential proclamation or by Congress. So a prehistoric trackways national monument was designated by Congress, not by a president. And so OMDP, Organ Mountains, Desert Peaks, is 500,000 acres and PTNM is 5,000 acres. So you just delete a 0. Okay, so I'm sure you're all familiar somewhat with where our Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument is located. It can be confusing for people. A lot of people think that only the Organ Mountains is a national monument. You know, for visitors coming, you know, from out of town, it can be confusing because there's not one entry point and then you're inside the monument. The monument surrounds Las Cruces. And one way I like to think of it was David Soles. He wrote an article about the national monument, and he looked at it as the 4 cardinal directions. And so to the north of Las Cruces, we have the Doña Ana Mountains, which is our smallest unit, really popular for mountain biking and 4-wheel drive. To the northwest, we have one of our more remote regions, which is the Cir De Las Ubas. This has a lot of important archaeological sites, and it has 3 wilderness areas within it. So it has Cir De Las Ubas, Broad Canyon, and Robledo Mountain Wilderness. Robledo Mountain Wilderness is mostly within OMDP, but some of it is within PTNM. So PTNM is also here in surrounded by OMDP and the Robledo Mountains. So because OMDP is also in the Robledo Mountains, at least this section, we also have fossils in OMDP that are important to protect, not just prehistoric trackways. And then down here, one of our other really big units of the monument and also really remote is the Potreo Mountains. We have a lot of wilderness out here because of its remote area. We also have the Aden Lava Flow and Kilbourne Hole. And this area is more protected because of its geological features, the cinder cones, the craters. Okay, and so then here to the east, we have our most popular unit, which is the Organ Mountains. And this is where we have our 2 developed recreation sites, Aguirre Spring Recreation Area, which has our campground, and then Dripping Springs Natural Area. Soledad Deus area is not yet considered a developed recreation area, but it will be hopefully soon. We were expecting to install some vault toilets out there this past fall, but that didn't happen. And I'm not sure when we'll be able to do that. Hopefully sometime this year. And so that is 500,000 acres. Okay, so Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument became a monument. It was designated by Barack Obama through a presidential proclamation, which you can find online. And this presidential proclamation is really important because it tells us why it became a national monument. And then it tells us how to manage it, sort of. It doesn't give us the details of how to manage it, but it gives us the skeleton. So for example, it tells us what are the resources, objects, and values. Why did it become a national monument? So it became a national monument because of its cultural, paleontological, geological, visual, ecological, and scientific values. And that's a lot. So that's why it became a national monument. And it gives us, these are just two examples that I pulled out of the proclamation, but it gives us some management rules, such as no more mineral leasing and no more additional roads or trails within the monument. So out of this proclamation, then, we have to make a more detailed management plan. And that is also guided by FLTMA, where we have to create land use plans. In our case, it's a resource management plan on how to manage the monument. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. But quickly, this is our monument staff. So we have the big boss up here, our monument manager. And then she manages our paleontologist, our outdoor rec planner. So our paleontologist does a lot of surveying to discover new fossil localities or to monitor known fossil localities. And a bunch of other things. Outdoor rec planner, she does a lot of things, of course, with recreation. So for example, the vault toilet over at Soledad Canyon, she's the one who plans for that. Installing new kiosks, she plans for that. People want to have organized events on public lands, she administers the special recreation permits for that. So these are just like some examples of like what some of the staff does. We have an archaeologist. He also surveys he does cultural surveys. He reviews cultural projects. Yes, so that's archaeologists. And for any of these people, if you want to contact them directly, you can. You can come to our office and they have their business cards, or you can contact me and I can give you their contact information. We have a wildlife biologist position that's currently vacant. We have our natural resource specialist, and he takes care of grazing permits within the monument. So we do allow grazing in our monument. So he monitors about 36 allotments. So about 36 permits, 36 different ranchers, I guess, that graze their cattle on public lands within the monument. He has a GIS intern who spends a lot of time making sure that fences are where they say they are and dirt tanks are where they say they are. And then we have a completely new person came in. He just came in 2 weeks ago or a week ago, supervisory park ranger, and then he supervises all the rest of us park rangers. And we do have 2 seasonal park ranger positions that are currently vacant. This is all of the monument staff, and aside from that, we have law enforcement rangers. We have 2 law enforcement rangers that work all the district. So that's 5.4 million acres of public lands for two law enforcement rangers and 5.4 million acres of public lands. We also have our BLM volunteers who do anything from trail patrol, and they basically run the visitor center. If you go up there to the A.B. Cox Visitor Center at Dripping Springs, who's going to help you? It's going to be one of our volunteers. And then of course we have the district staff that helps us with NEPA projects and anything else that we need, because, you know, we don't have like a hydrologist or what else? Or a botanist. We don't have any of that. So we get help from the district staff. Okay, so we have a lot of projects that were started a long time ago and are still going, or that were finished, or that we're currently working on, or starting new. So I just pulled out a few of those projects. We're going to start with the most important one, is that we are restarting the resource management plan. And this is super, super important that we have a resource management plan in place, because that tells us exactly how to manage Organ Mountain's Desert Peaks National Monument. It tells us what we can or can't do, and establishes rules. Right now we, you know, for example, at Dripping Springs, just a really small change, but we only allow dogs in 2 parts of the trails, 2 trail sections up at Dripping Springs. Well, a resource management plan will help us decide if we don't want to allow dogs, or we want to allow dogs everywhere, or just keep as is. But it's really important. And, you know, we have our hands tied a lot of the times when visitors or the community members want something done on public lands or within the monument, but we can't do it because we don't have the RMP in place. So now we are finally able to restart it, and fingers crossed that it gets done within the next 3 to 5 years. Fingers crossed, but they take a long time, and it might take longer than that. Something else that's happening is that we got funding to redesign the visitor center. So not yet to actually do the work. Hopefully that funding comes in later, but we got funding. And so we now have blueprints of how we're going to redesign the visitor center. So we're going to make it, so the visitor center, if you've been there, we have the front part, which is a visitor center. And then the back, we have an apartment where our volunteers live. And so we're going to move the volunteers out of there, and we're going to include that apartment as part of the visitor center. Right, for right now, the next step is to design new interpretive exhibits at the visitor center. All of our wilderness, should put that one over there, was originally wilderness study areas, but then in 2019, the John D. Dingle Jr. Conservation Management and Recreation Act was passed, and it converted a lot of that WSA into wilderness. So we have over 200,000 acres of wilderness, and we have to make wilderness plans for those too. And so what we're working on right now is we have a wilderness crew, and they are doing wilderness character inventories to help create baseline data for the wilderness plans. Something else that we've done with wilderness is that our wilderness park ranger has installed signs at all of the boundaries of wilderness to try and let people know that you're in wilderness and you can't drive in here anymore. So sometimes that's worked, sometimes they're taken out, and there are some really popular places where we did have to install fencing, such as Modoc Mine Loop, which is off of Baylor Canyon Road. Something else that we have is that we are still maintaining 14 wildlife guzzlers within the monument. So hopefully you might have seen those when you're hiking out and about on public lands. They're not always off of trails. You kind of have to be hiking off trail, but they're really large brown water catchment containers for wildlife. Okay, so Restore New Mexico was completed. Over 30,000 acres were treated for mesquite. Herbicide was applied to mesquite. A lot of those acres were near in the Potreo's unit of the monument, so near Aden Crater. And this is to try and restore grasslands. Because as you know, through to overgrazing, drought. All of our desert grasslands became shrubs, so shrublands, so mesquite. So they're trying to restore it to grasslands. Our archaeologist is working on submitting the Van Patten Mountain Camp into the National Register of Historic Places. It was denied the first time many years ago, but our archaeologist is going to give it another try. We partnered up with NMSU and they did an extensive cultural survey of Peña Blanca. So they, compiled all the information of what work was already done there, what work needed to be done, and then they did it. And so we have now a complete survey of all the archaeological sites at Peña Blanca, which there is a lot. And then finally, something else that I thought was interesting is that the BLM is trying to push us to do more e-commerce. As you know, you go up to Dripping Springs and you have to pay cash or check only. We don't accept any credit cards, mainly because we don't have really good Wi-Fi up there to support a credit card transaction system. But BLM wants us to move towards recreation.gov. So I'm sure you've encountered this before on other parts of the country where you're reserving your campsite. And so they want us to try and move towards that way, towards e-commerce. So recreation.gov and scan and pay as you go types of models. So we are in the process of trying to move to recreation.gov. Maybe my best expert guess is within 2 years, you'll have to go to recreation.gov, make an account, and then pay for your fee that way. Okay, awesome. So with every new administration, we get new priorities. And so the BLM is under the Secretary of the Interior, under the Department of the Interior, sorry. And then our Secretary of the Interior is Deb Haaland. And so she set these 5 priorities. The first one is responsible development of renewable energy on public lands, strengthen government relationship with sovereign tribal nations, make investments to support the creation of jobs, and work to conserve at least 30% of our lands and waters by the year 2030 or 30 by 30, and then centering equity and environmental justice. So now the BLM here in the monument, our priority is the RMP, and then all of the projects that we do have to connect somehow to these 5 priorities. And that is, in connecting to these priorities is how we also get funding for those projects. Okay, so I wanted to end with Johnny Horizon. I don't know if any of you have heard of Johnny Horizon before. He was around during the 1970s, and he was the BLM's kind of first mascot. He is a cowboy, and he became so popular that he was even adopted by the Department of the Interior, and a lot of celebrities did concerts with him. I'm not super familiar with the celebrities of that time, but from what I hear, they were famous, such as Burl Ives, Sonny and Cher. And I can't remember the other celebrities, but those are some of the ones that I remember. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it. So I wanted to play one of the little songs that Burl Ives sang with Johnny Horizon. Okay, awesome. And then I think I think it was 1979, they decided that he had done his job and he had done it well. So they decided not to do Johnny Horizon anymore. And so BLM New Mexico, we now have a new sort of mascot, is Seymour Antelope. And it was started here in New Mexico, and it was meant only for youth programs. And it was kind of adopted by the whole BLM as our mascot. But yeah, this was Johnny Horizon. And so remember, this land is your land, so keep it clean. Pick up litter, close gates after you drive through them. Respect fish and wildlife. I think he had a bunch of little rules to follow, kind of like leave no trace. But it was interesting that it included specifically closed gates after you drive through them, okay, because of the cattle. Cattle are big in the BLM. Okay, so here's my contact information if you have any questions. And I guess I could take questions through the chat. Oh, were you not able to hear it? Vic sent a message saying that he couldn't hear the little song. Oh, the visitor survey. There's just so many things that happen. I'm telling you, there's a lot of projects that happen in our office, especially with the monument. That was, I remember that survey. I can't remember exactly what it's for, but unfortunately, I do not have any results to share from that. I am kind of curious about it now because I had completely forgotten about it. So now I want to know like what happened with that. Okay, so can you tell us more about your interpretive programs at OMDP and Trackways? So because we used to have regular guided hikes, our paleontologist and our archaeologist and then myself, but because of COVID, we kind of fell off the habit of having regular guided hikes. I'm still hoping to get Colin to restart. But we've been doing kind of like just random guided hikes now. So we've been doing them through Celebration of Our Mountains. Garrett, our archaeologist, is gonna have an upcoming guided hike sometime this month. I can't remember off the top of my head when it was, and then I can't access this. Can't access my calendar right now. But hopefully we do try to advertise all of our guided hikes on Facebook. So keep an eye on that. And hopefully we can get back onto a regular habit of doing guided hikes. But we do have an agreement right now with the Friends of Organ Mountains Desert Peaks. So through this agreement, we gave the Friends about $30,000 to start a docent program. And they're still trying to get themselves organized around that. So keep an eye out for events from the Friends group through the docent program. Okay, so what does BLM think of the spread of the gemsbok, so the oryx, right? So we've had a lot of oryx sightings at Dripping Springs and Soledad, and sometimes at Achenbach. I don't know if everybody was aware of that. So the Bureau of Land Management, we manage habitat, but we don't really manage wildlife specifically. So we let the New Mexico Game and Fish manage wildlife. So in this case, we are working with the New Mexico Game and Fish to deal with the oryx up in the Oregon Mountains. So, you know, when visitors complain to us about the oryx, about aggressiveness, we contact New Mexico Game and Fish, and they go up with one of our law enforcement officers. And in the past, so far, what has happened is that one of the oryx was destroyed by the New Mexico Game and Fish game warden. One of the oryx was scared off through rubber bullets. And then the other oryx that the game warden went to search for were not there when he arrived. So we're just kind of trying to spread the word about the oryx to, I know people are kind of excited about them, and people go close to them to take videos and photos, and the oryx are kind of, don't really care too much about the people. So they're really getting habituated. So we are kind of worried about people getting close to the oryx and then something happening. So we're trying to educate people to not get close to the oryx, even if the oryx does not seem really scared of you or is not very aggressive towards you. So yeah, that's what's happening with the oryx. It's complicated. Personally, I am, a little concerned because it's not a native animal and it just keeps spreading. I talked to a game warden from Texas, and a person, this woman driving down Trans Mountain hit one of the oryx, and he had to put it down because it was really gravely injured. So they're getting pretty far out there, even into El Paso. And this was I already talked to him. This was like in 2019, 2018, when I talked to him about that. Oh, okay. So the Saturday field trip is up to Pine Tree Trail. I haven't seen the weather, so please check the weather before, if you decide to come with me on Pine Tree Trail. Cheatgrass is a really big issue that we have in the Western United States. In New Mexico, it's not such a huge issue compared to Utah or Nevada. But we do have some up on Pine Tree Trail, and potentially we think that it might have been brought in by wildland firefighters, because there was a big fire there, maybe 2006, I think. And so it might have been spread because of that. It is winter though, I know. So it is an annual. So it is currently not, it's currently dead, but I know in past winters, I have still seen it standing, but brown. So maybe we'll find some cheatgrass, and if we don't, we will get to see other plants up there. And we will be doing the whole loop. So just, if you haven't been on Pine Tree Trail, just know it is moderately strenuous because it is uphill the first half of the way. And then there's a lot of water bars that you have to step over. That makes it more difficult. But of course, we won't go super fast. It's not a competition. Okay, let's see. I think I missed. So someone asked, where can I find maps of some of the cultural sites? So that is a tricky question. I know, cultural sites, the most famous that we kind of advertise are Peña Blanca and Dripping Springs. We, the BLM, do not provide any maps of specific archaeological sites for their protection. I don't even have access to the secret maps that the archaeologists have. I don't I'm not allowed to view them. But if you go online, you'll find, information about, Valles Canyon or Broad Canyon. The BLM doesn't really want to advertise those two spots too much because they haven't been fully surveyed for a cultural resource. And so that's why we don't have guided hikes out there, but maybe in the future we'll have some guided hikes out there with our archaeologists. Okay, so another question is, the Las Cruces Sun News mentioned that a tribal name for the Organ Mountains, meaning rising rocks, may be revealed soon. Is there a chance that OMDP will adapt a new name for the Organ Mountains? So the National Monument was created because of community support. For many, many years, a lot of local community members, they fought for this area to become a national monument. The same with wilderness. Community members got together and decided that they wanted to convert some of the WSAs to wilderness. And so the BLM does not have anything to do with that, with which public lands become national monument, with which public lands become wilderness. And the same will happen with renaming of mountains and other features. We do what the community wants, and if the community at some point wants to adapt or change the name of Organ Mountains, then we will do that once it's like handed down to us from up above, for sure. But I'm personally excited, hopefully, to get a couple of features renamed. Organ Mountains, it's originally named by the Spanish conquistadors, but it had a lot of different other indigenous names, such as Cir De Las Ubas, which is in Spanish, oddly enough. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens. But we as a BLM, we're not doing anything about that. We're just gonna wait and see. Okay. So if we don't, it is already 8. I don't wanna take up more of your time, but I am willing to stay if anybody has any last questions, and then everybody else is free to go. I want to say thank you for coming to my presentation and staying until the end. I know sometimes it's just like Zoom presentations are just difficult. I can't see people. I can't like see how people are feeling. Yes, so teaching, I'm teaching biology at Las Cruces High. Can I arrange hikes with you for the kids? Yes, you can. I would love any teacher that approaches me to do guided hikes for students, I say yes. And then if you need transportation funds, we can get you transportation funds as well. Thank you.